Clarence Clay Evans was testing his new mower on his golf course when a woman called 911 claiming he was a thief just because of her shameful prejudice. But when the cops showed up, she got a hard lesson. Before we dive into this gripping drama, drop a note. Where are you watching from? I'd love to see how far this story spreads. Give it a thumbs up and follow for more great tales daily. Let's get started. Clarence Clay Evans stood atop the gentle rise of the 9th fairway at Evans Green, his 18-hole masterpiece nestled in the rolling hills just outside town. The morning sun spilled over the manicured greens, catching the dew on each blade of grass and turning the course into a sea of shimmering emerald. At 47, Clay still felt the pull of hands-on work. Today he was testing a new mower, its blades whirring as he guided it along the edge of the hole. He wore a faded navy polo and jeans, the kind of outfit that didn't scream wealth, but fit a man who'd spent decades earning every inch of this land. The air carried the sweet scent of clippings and pine, a far cry from the exhaust fumes of his youth. To Clay, this wasn't just a golf course. It was a legacy carved from years of grit, a place where folks from all walks came to swing clubs and share stories under the wide-open sky. Back in the day, Clay had been a caddy at a rundown course 30 miles down the road, hauling bags for men in pressed slacks who barely glanced his way. He was 22 then, wiry and quiet, soaking up every word he overheard. Talk of investments, land deals, the game behind the game. With no college degree or family money, he scraped by on tips, stashing every dime in a tin box under his bed. After a decade of saving and a bank loan that took guts to sign, he bought a patch of overgrown scrubland nobody else wanted. Bit by bit, he cleared it, shaped it, and built Evans Green into a course that drew players from across the state. Pros who tipped him as a kid now tipped their hats to him instead. The clubhouse, with its cedar beams and stone fireplace, stood as a testament to what a man could do when he refused to quit. Every morning, Clay walked his course before the first golfers arrived, a ritual as steady as the sunrise. He'd check the sand traps, rake a bunker smooth, or, like today, test new equipment to keep the greens pristine. He loved the quiet of those hours, the way the wind rustled the oaks, and the distant hum of a sprinkler felt like music. Evans Green wasn't just a business. It was his heart laid bare, a dream he'd fought for through busted knuckles and sleepless nights. Golf magazines had called it a hidden gem, and the locals bragged about it at every diner in town. Clay didn't care much for the praise. He cared that his course was honest, tough but fair, just like him. That honesty ran deep in Clay. He'd grown up in a clapboard house with a leaky roof, one of 5 kids raised by a single mom who worked double shifts at a factory. Money was tight, but pride wasn't. His mother taught him to hold his head high and let his work speak. That lesson stuck when he faced skeptics who'd smirked at a black kid lugging clubs, or later, bankers who'd hesitated over his loan. He'd proved them wrong, not with words, but with results. Now, at Evans Green, he greeted players with a firm handshake and a smile, knowing every divot and tree bore his mark. He wasn't flashy. Didn't need to be. The course said it all. Marjorie Ellis stepped onto the patio of the clubhouse that same morning, her crisp white golf skirt and designer visor marking her as new money in an old game. At 60, she joined Evans Green 2 weeks ago, her membership paid in full with cash she'd inherited from a late husband's insurance business. She'd spent decades in gated communities, sipping martinis at country clubs where the help knew their place. Here, she'd already lodged complaints. The coffee was lukewarm, the towels too thin, and carried herself with the air of someone who expected the world to bend. She squinted across the fairway at Clay, his mower kicking up a faint cloud of dust, and frowned. To her, he didn't belong, not on a course this fine. Clay glanced up as Marjorie's shadow fell across the grass, her arms crossed and lips pursed tight. He'd seen her type before, folks who sized him up and saw a worker, not the owner. She didn't say a word at first, just stood there, her silence louder than the mower's hum. Clay tipped his head in a polite nod, figuring she'd move on, but her eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering like a storm brewing. He didn't know it yet, but Marjorie had already made up her mind. He wasn't just testing a mower, he was trespassing on her idea of what Evans Green should be. The clash was coming, and it'd shake the morning stillness to its core. Marjorie Ellis planted herself on the 9th fairway, her shadow stretching long across the grass as she glared at Clay. "Just what do you think you're doing out here with that thing?" she barked, pointing at the mower like it was a smoking gun. "This is a first-class golf course, not some field for you to tear up." Clay shut off the engine, the sudden quiet amplifying her voice across the green. He wiped his hands on his jeans and turned to her, keeping his tone even. "I'm Clarence Evans. Clay, I own this course, just testing the new mower to keep it sharp." Marjorie's laugh cut through the air, short and harsh. "Own it? Oh, that's a good one. You expect me to believe that?" Clay tilted his head, sizing her up as she stood there, arms crossed and chin jutting out. "It's the truth," he said simply, pointing to the Evans Green logo stitched on his faded polo. "My name's on the gate, the clubhouse, everything here." Marjorie smirked, stepping closer, her golf shoes sinking into the turf. "A logo proves nothing," she snapped. "Folks like you don't own places like this. They mow 'em maybe if they're lucky. The real owner's probably sipping coffee inside, not sweating out here like some hired hand." Clay's jaw tightened, but he kept his cool. "I built this place from scratch. Don't need to sip coffee to prove it." Her eyes narrowed and she waved a hand dismissively. "Built it, please. I've played courses from Florida to California, and I know how this works," she said, her voice dripping with scorn. "Owners don't push mowers around. They hire folks for that. You're just spinning a tale, and a bad one at that." Clay fished his phone from his pocket, pulling up a digital copy of his business license, the screen glowing with his name in bold. "Here's the proof," he said, holding it out. Marjorie barely glanced at it before swatting the air. "That? Anybody can fake papers these days. Doesn't mean a thing," she scoffed. Clay slid the phone back into his pocket, his patience thinning but still holding. "What's it take to convince you, then?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "This is my course. Been mine for 15 years. Marjorie leaned in, her visor casting a shadow over her flushed face. "Convince me? I don't need convincing. I know what I see," she shot back. "People like you don't run a place this fine. It's not how it's done. You think I'm green enough to buy that hogwash?" Clay crossed his arms, meeting her stare. "People like me? Spell it out. What's that mean?" he pressed, calm but unyielding. Marjorie straightened up, her lips curling into a smug grin. "Oh, you know darn well what I mean," she said, her tone icy. "This is a top-notch club, classy, exclusive. The owner's supposed to have a certain look, a presence, not be out here in dirty jeans fiddling with machines like some nobody." Clay's eyes flickered with a spark of irritation, but he kept his voice level. "So it's about how I look? I don't need fancy duds to own what's mine. Maybe you ought to tell me who this real owner is, since you're so sure." Her grin faltered, but she thrust her chin higher. "I don't need a name. I can tell you're not it." The air between them thickened as a breeze rustled the trees, carrying her words across the fairway. "You're not fooling me," Marjorie went on, her voice climbing. "I've got half a mind to call the manager and have you tossed out." Clay raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Go ahead. Call the manager. That'd be me. Who else you going to get?" Her face reddened, and she jabbed a finger at him. "Don't you get smart with me," she snapped. "I'll call the police instead. They'll sort this out quick. I've got a duty to keep this place proper, and you're not proper at all." Clay shrugged, unfazed. "Do what you gotta do. I'm not going anywhere." A handful of golfers drifted over from the clubhouse patio, drawn by Marjorie's rising pitch. They stood at the edge of the green, gripping their coffees and clubs, murmuring to each other. "What's she on about?" one asked, squinting at Clay. "That's Mr. Evans, isn't it?" another whispered. Marjorie spun toward them, seizing the chance. "You all see this, don't you?" she called out, her voice echoing. "This fella's out here tearing up the course, acting like he owns it. He's trouble, mark my words." Clay shook his head, leaning against the mower. "Trouble's not me. It's the one yelling lies, he said, loud enough for them to hear. The murmurs grew, uncertainty rippling through the group. Marjorie yanked her phone from her golf bag, her fingers trembling with indignation as she dialed. Yes, 911. I've got a situation at Evans Green Golf Course, she barked into the receiver, pacing the grass. There's a man here, suspicious type, messing with equipment, saying he's the owner. I don't buy it. He's ruining this place, and he might be dangerous. Get someone out here fast. She hung up, turning to Clay with a triumphant glare. Police are on their way, she declared. You'd better have a good story, 'cause I know you're no owner. Not here, not ever. Clay stayed put, his broad frame steady. My story's the truth. We'll see what they think. The crowd swelled as more members wandered over, some peering from the clubhouse windows, others stepping closer with curious frowns. Marjorie played to them, raising her voice louder. Look at him, folks, she shouted, pointing at Clay. Does he look like he belongs here, out on a fancy course like this? I say no, and you ought to back me up. A gray-haired man in a sweater hesitated, then muttered, I seen him around. Think he's the owner? A woman nodded. Yeah, that's Clay Evans. Marjorie waved them off, her face twisting. You're all blind. He's pulling one over on us. I won't stand for it. The tension crackled. The crowd split between doubt and recognition. Clay watched the scene unfold, his hands resting on the mower's handles, his calm a stark contrast to Marjorie's storm. I've been here 15 years. Ask anyone who's played this course, he said, his voice cutting through her noise. She's got no call to make trouble, but she's welcome to try. Marjorie whirled back, her eyes blazing. Trouble? You're the trouble, she screeched, her pitch hitting the treetops. I'll prove it when they haul you off. I've got rights, and this club deserves better than you. The distant wail of sirens crept closer, a low hum growing sharper, and Marjorie smirked, folding her arms. Hear that? Your time's up, she said, victorious. Clay didn't budge, his gaze steady as the sound of gravel crunching under tires reached the fairway. The crowd hushed, heads turning toward the clubhouse drive where red and blue lights flickered through the trees. Marjorie stood tall, her chest puffed out like she'd just sunk a winning putt. They're here, she announced, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Let's see you talk your way out of this. Clay leaned back against the mower, arms crossed, his face unreadable but firm. I don't need to talk. I've got the truth, he said quietly. The air hung heavy, the morning's peace shattered, as all eyes waited for the officers to step into the fray. The police cars rolled to a stop near the clubhouse drive, their lights cutting through the morning mist and painting the ninth fairway in streaks of red and blue. Officer Daniels, a lean veteran with a gray mustache and a stern jaw, stepped out first, his boots grinding gravel with authority. Officer Ruiz, younger, with a brisk step and a notepad ready, followed close behind. The crowd of golfers parted, their whispers dying down as Marjorie surged forward, her golf skirt flapping. Thank goodness you're here, she exclaimed, pointing at Clay beside his mower. This man's ruining the course. Says he's the owner, but it's a lie. He's trouble. Get him out of here. A few in the crowd frowned, one muttering, That's Clay. He owns this place. Clay stood tall, brushing clippings from his jeans, and approached the officers with a steady stride. I'm Clarence Evans. Clay, he said, his voice deep and even as he pulled a worn wallet from his pocket. I own Evans Green. Here's my business license, land deed, and a news clipping from our opening. Check it out. He handed the papers to Daniels, who squinted at them under the sun. Marjorie lunged forward, swatting at the stack. Don't believe that nonsense, she shouted, her voice piercing the quiet. It's all fake. He's a fraud. I know golf courses. He's no owner. Clay held firm, pulling out his phone. Got backups here too, he said calmly, showing digital copies. Daniels raised a hand, silencing Marjorie as he reviewed the deed, dated 2008, notarized, and the license with Clarence Evans in clear print. Ruiz glanced over, her face lighting up. Hold on. You're Clay Evans? She asked, grinning. I saw you at last year's charity scramble. My cousin raves about this course. You nailed that birdie on 18, right? Daniels nodded, passing the papers back. Looks legit, he said gruffly. He's the owner longer than most around here, the crowd murmured. A man in a plaid cap called, "That's our Clay." Marjorie's cheeks flushed red, her hands trembling as she ripped off her visor and flung it down with a thud. "No, that can't be," she shrieked, her voice splintering like glass. "You're all fools. He's lying. Those papers are phony. I'd stake everything on it." She stomped forward, her golf shoes gouging the turf, and jabbed a finger at Clay. "He can't own this place. Look at him. Dirty clothes, no style. Owners don't mow grass." Clay met her gaze, his tone steady as steel. "I built this course from nothing, every hole, every inch. Don't need fancy threads to own what's mine." The crowd gasped, a few nodding, but Marjorie's eyes blazed. "You're a nobody," she spat, her hair tumbling loose as she waved her arms wildly. Tom Hargrove, a gray-hailed golfer in a neat sweater, pushed through the onlookers, his voice booming. "I know Clay Evans. I played here opening week," he declared. "He's the real McCoy. Sank a putt with me at the 15 Invitational. Best player I've seen." A woman in a sun hat added, "He redid the bunkers on 12 last year, hands-on." Another voice chimed, "Runs this place like a champ. She's off her rocker." Ruiz turned to Marjorie, frowning. "You said he's ruining the course. Where's your proof?" Marjorie faltered, then pointed wildly. "Proof? Just look at him. He doesn't belong here, not as an owner." The crowd's murmurs grew sharper, skepticism turning to scorn. Daniel stepped in, his tall frame looming as Marjorie shrank back. "His papers check out. License, deed, all legal," he said, his voice rough. "You've got witnesses saying he's the owner and my recorder's been on since we arrived. Accusing him with no evidence? That's slander, ma'am, and it's serious." Marjorie's eyes widened, her breath hitching. I was just checking," she stammered, her voice cracking. "He shouldn't be here," Tom chuckled. "Shouldn't? He's why this course is gold. She's the one who doesn't fit." The crowd laughed, a few pulling out phones to film as Marjorie's face twisted in panic. Her purse slipped and she scrambled to grab it, but then bolted toward the clubhouse, shouting, "I'll get the manager. I'm not done." Her heel caught on the grass and she tumbled forward, skirt tearing and one shoe flying off. The crowd roared with laughter, phones flashing as she sprawled, her dignity shredded. "She's a mess," a man hooted, zooming in. Marjorie clambered up, dirt streaking her blouse, and yelled, "Stop filming, you're all against me." Ruiz shook her head. "You've got no case. His proof's solid and folks know him." Daniels added, "That false call's trouble enough. Slander could bury you if he sues, and he's got plenty to back it." Clay crossed his arms, standing firm as the crowd's jeers washed over Marjorie. He'd heard her kind of talk before, years of it, but he'd built too much to let it shake him now. "She's had her piece," he said to the officers, his voice steady as the fairway's oaks. "I don't need to say more. My course speaks for me." Marjorie staggered to her feet, clutching her torn skirt, and fished her phone out with shaky hands. "I'm calling my lawyers," she cried, dialing frantically. "I'll sue this whole club. They let a fake run it." The call went to speaker and a gruff voice crackled, "Marjorie, I'm not taking this." "You're wrong. Good luck." The crowd erupted, guffaws echoing as she froze, the line cutting dead. Daniels tipped his hat to Clay, a faint smile softening his weathered face. "Sorry this turned into a circus, Mr. Evans," he said. "Didn't need to go this far." Clay nodded, shrugging it off. "No harm." "Thanks for settling it." Ruiz grinned, pocketing her notepad. "Next time you've got a tournament, save me a spot. My game's rusty." Clay chuckled. "You're on. Swing by any time." Marjorie stood there, one shoe gone, skirt ripped, her visor trampled as she turned to flee again. She stumbled toward the parking lot, the crowd parting with hoots and camera flashes. "She's cooked, and Clay's the king," ringing out. Her purse spilled again, golf tees scattering, as the morning sun climbed higher, leaving Clay unshaken, his course in the truth. Still standing tall, Clay dusted off his hands and turned to the officers with a quiet nod. "You folks up for a round sometime?" he asked, his deep voice warm against the fading echoes of Marjorie's outburst. Got a nice set of clubs in the shop. My thanks for straightening this out. Ruiz's eyes lit up. Count me in. I'll bring my cousin too. Daniels tipped his hat, a gruff maybe slipping out. Marjorie, still clutching her torn skirt, spun around one last time, her face a mask of fury. "This isn't over," she screeched, her voice hoarse. "I'll sue you all, mark my words." The crowd hooted, a man yelling, "Sure, lady, good luck with that lawyer," as she stumbled toward the parking lot, her lone shoe slapping the pavement. By noon, the video hit the web. Karen falls flat calling 911 on golf course owner, and it spread like wildfire across social media. A local news truck rolled up an hour later, cameras catching the tail end of Marjorie's retreat, her ripped skirt and dirt-streaked blouse now infamous. The clip racked up thousands of views, headlines blaring, "Club members' meltdown goes viral at Evans Green." Clay barely glanced at it. He was too busy greeting a flood of golfers, old regulars and new faces alike who'd heard the tale and wanted to shake his hand. "You showed her, Clay," one said, clapping his shoulder. He offered free coffee at the clubhouse that day, a small nod to the folks who'd backed him, the patio buzzing with laughter and chatter. Marjorie's downfall was swift and brutal. By evening, the club's board met over the phone, voting unanimously to revoke her membership. No one wanted the Karen who'd attacked their star owner. She tried spinning her story at the pro shop. "I was just looking out for the course," but the clerk cut her off. "Save it. Nobody's buying that line." Word spread fast. Regulars snubbed her at the diner down the road, whispering, "That's her, the one from the video," as she sat alone, her coffee untouched. The viral clip sealed her fate. Comments piled up. "What a fool," and "Clay's a legend." And by nightfall, her name was a punchline from tee to green. Clay hung a weathered golf trophy from his caddy days on the clubhouse wall that week, a quiet reminder of where he'd started. The course hummed with life. Players lined the fairways, praising the greens and swapping stories about the Karen fiasco. A group of locals dropped by with a hand-painted sign, "Clay Evans, the real champ," and he nailed it up by the door, shaking their hands with a grin. He didn't crow about it. Didn't need to. His steady hands kept the mower running, the bunkers raked, the dream alive. Marjorie's noise had faded, drowned by the truth he'd built, hole by hole, over 15 years. Prejudice can yell all it wants, but hard work and truth swing harder, and they don't miss. Next time you're quick to judge, take a breath. Ask a question instead. It beats tripping over your own feet in front of a crowd. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on more exciting stories every day. See you in the next one.